Hi, and welcome to English Hub. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started. Canada and the United States are neighbors. They do a lot of business together, but now they have a problem. The United States government decides to put new taxes on things from Canada. These taxes are called tariffs. Because of these tariffs, things from Canada become more expensive in the United States. Canada is not happy about this, so Canada decides to put tariffs on things from the United States. Now things from the United States become more expensive in Canada too. The leader of Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau, talks about this problem. He says it is like a trade war. A trade war happens when countries put tariffs on each other's goods. This makes buying and selling between them more difficult. China was also involved, and it all seemed very messy. This story isn't about who is right or wrong. It's about understanding why these trade wars happen and what they mean. It's like trying to understand a big, complicated game. There are many players, many rules, and it's not always easy to see who is winning or losing. This book is about trade wars. Trade wars are not simple. There are different sides to the story. It is not always clear who is right or wrong. In this book, we will ask some important questions. Why do trade wars start? Who wins and who loses? Are there better ways to solve problems instead of using tariffs? A trade war can hurt businesses and people. When things cost more, people may not buy them. This can make companies lose money. When companies lose money, some workers may lose their jobs. But some people think trade wars help local businesses because they do not have to compete with cheaper products from other countries. We will look at both sides of the issue. Trade wars have happened before. These tariffs made trade problems worse. Countries have learned from history, but trade wars still happen. In this book, we will explore why they happen and how they affect people. Chapter 2. What is a trade war? To understand a trade war, we must first understand some important words. A tariff is a tax on things that come from other countries. For example, if a store in your country buys toys from another country, the government adds an extra cost to those toys. This makes the toys more expensive for people to buy. Another word to know is quota. A quota is a limit on the number of things a country can buy from another country. For example, if a country only allows 1,000 cars to come from another country each year, this is a quota. A subsidy is money that a government gives to help its own businesses. For example, a government might give money to its farmers. This helps them sell food at lower prices. But this can cause problems because farmers in other countries might not be able to compete. A trade deficit happens when a country buys more things from other countries than it sells to them. For example, if a country buys a lot of goods from other countries but does not sell much in return, it has a trade deficit. Some governments use tariffs, quotas, and subsidies to protect their own businesses. This is called protectionism. They do this to make local products cheaper than imported products. The opposite of protectionism is free trade. Free trade means countries can buy and sell without tariffs and quotas. Free trade makes it cheaper to buy things from other countries. Trade wars affect prices. If a country adds a tariff to shoes from another country, the price of those shoes will go up. People may buy fewer shoes or buy cheaper local shoes instead. Some people say protectionism is good. They think it protects jobs. If a country makes its own steel and puts tariffs on steel from other countries, local steel factories can sell more. This helps workers in those factories. Other people say protectionism is bad. They think it makes things too expensive. If a country puts tariffs on food, the price of food goes up and people have to pay more. Trade wars are complicated. There are many opinions. Some people win and some people lose. In this book, we will look at different arguments to help understand trade wars better. Chapter 3. Trade wars in history. Trade wars have happened many times in history. Let's look at some examples. One example is the Opium Wars in China many years ago. Britain wanted to buy tea from China, but China did not want to buy many things from Britain. So Britain started selling opium, a dangerous drug, to China. Many Chinese people became addicted. The Chinese government tried to stop British ships from bringing opium. Britain did not like this and started a war against China. This was the Opium War. China lost the war and was forced to trade with Britain. This shows that sometimes strong countries use force to control trade. Another example is the Corn Laws in Britain in the 1800s. Britain put taxes on imported grain, called corn in Britain. This helped British farmers, but it made food very expensive for everyone else. Poor people could not afford food. After many protests, Britain changed the rules and allowed cheaper grain from other countries. This helped many people. This shows that trade rules can change over time to help the economy. A famous trade war happened in the United States in 1930. The U.S. government made a law called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It put high tariffs on many things from other countries. The U.S. wanted to protect its businesses during the Great Depression, a time when people had very little money. But other countries became angry and put tariffs on American goods. This made the world's economy worse. This shows that trade wars can have bad results. Another example is Japan in the 1850s. For many years, Japan did not trade much with other countries. But in the 1850s, American ships came to Japan and asked Japan to open its ports for trade. At first, Japan said no, but the American ships were very strong. Japan had no choice and had to start trading. This shows that sometimes countries are forced to trade even if they do not want to. After World War II, many countries tried to make trade easier. They made rules in groups like GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and later the WTO, World Trade Organization. The idea was to make trade fair and reduce tariffs. The WTO still exists today to help solve trade problems. But trade is still not always fair. What can we learn from history? Trade wars can have big effects on people. When one country puts tariffs on goods, other countries do the same. This is called retaliation. Trade wars can make prices go up, hurt businesses, and even lead to conflicts. History shows us that trade is complicated, and leaders must be careful when making trade rules. Chapter 4. Who are the main players in a trade war? Many different groups are involved in trade wars. It is not just about countries. Companies and people inside those countries also feel the effects. First, we have big countries like the United States, China, and the European Union. These countries trade a lot with others because they have large economies. Their actions can affect the whole world. Other important countries in trade are Canada, Mexico, and Japan. They also have strong economies and do a lot of trade. Each country has its own goals. For example, the United States wants to protect its industries, like steel and car production. It might use tariffs to make products from other countries more expensive. This way, people in the U.S. might buy more American products. China, on the other hand, wants to sell its goods to many countries. It does not like tariffs that make it harder to sell its products. The European Union is a group of countries that trade with each other. They also trade with other parts of the world and want trade to be easy. Some countries are still growing their economies. These are called developing countries. They often sell things like coffee, cotton, and clothes to richer countries. Trade wars can be difficult for them because they do not have as much power as bigger countries. Big companies that do business in many countries are also important. These are called multinational corporations. Companies like Nike, car companies, and phone companies make products in one country and sell them in many others. If there is a trade war, they might need to change their business. For example, if tariffs make products too expensive, a company might move its factories to a different country. People inside a country also feel the effects of a trade war. Farmers can have problems if their products become too expensive to sell in other countries. Factory workers might lose jobs if companies cannot sell enough products. Shoppers might have to pay more for things in stores. Some groups try to change the government's trade rules. This is called lobbying. For example, if steel companies in the U.S. want tariffs on steel from other countries, they might ask the government to add them. Trade wars affect different jobs and industries in different ways. Some workers might benefit, but many others suffer. Understanding the different players helps us see why trade wars happen and what their effects are. Chapter 5. The Rules of Trade. Trade between countries needs rules, just like a game. If there are no rules, it becomes chaotic. These rules help countries trade fairly and predictably. One important group that makes trade rules is the World Trade Organization, or WTO. The WTO is like a club for countries that trade. Almost every country in the world is a member. The WTO has rules about tariffs and other trade barriers. The goal is to make trade easier and fairer for everyone. The WTO has helped lower tariffs worldwide, making goods cheaper for many people. It has also helped countries trade more. However, some people say the rules are not always fair. They think rich countries have more power than poor countries in the WTO. Disagreements between countries happen often. When countries have a trade problem, they can go to the WTO for help. The WTO acts like a court for trade issues. If one country believes another is breaking the rules, the WTO can decide what should happen. But it is not always easy to make countries follow these decisions. Some countries ignore the rules or find ways around them. There is also a debate about free trade and fair trade. Free trade means trading with fewer rules and barriers. Many people believe this helps economies grow and makes goods cheaper. But others say trade should also be fair. They think rules should protect workers, the environment, and small businesses. Fair trade means different things to different people. Some believe it means making sure workers get good wages and safe conditions. Others believe it means protecting local industries from foreign competition. It is hard to make trade completely fair because countries have different opinions on what is fair. International trade rules are important because they help create a stable system. But the system is not perfect. There are still challenges in making trade fair and making sure all countries follow the rules. Finding a balance between free trade and fair trade is a big challenge. Chapter 6. Who wins and who loses? Trade wars have winners and losers. Some people and businesses benefit, but many suffer. It is not always easy to see who wins and who loses. The effects can also change over time. Shoppers usually lose in trade wars. When tariffs make imported goods more expensive, prices in stores go up. For example, if the U.S. puts a tariff on shoes from China, those shoes will cost more in U.S. stores. People might have to pay more for the same products, which makes life more expensive. Businesses that import goods also lose. They have to pay more for products and might struggle to sell them. For example, if a car company imports parts from another country, the tariffs can increase their costs. Some companies move their factories to other countries to avoid tariffs. This is what Harley-Davidson did. Smaller businesses may not have this option and could go out of business. Some workers win, at least in the short term. If tariffs protect local industries, companies might produce more at home. For example, if the U.S. puts tariffs on foreign steel, U.S. steel companies might make more steel. This could create jobs for steel workers. But other workers lose if other countries put tariffs on U.S. goods in response. Companies that sell products to other countries might struggle. Farmers in the U.S. lost money when China put tariffs on American soybeans. Many lost their customers and had to sell their crops for lower prices. Farmers are often affected by trade wars. If tariffs make food more expensive, farmers might have trouble selling their products. During the trade war between the U.S. and China, U.S. farmers could not sell as many soybeans to China. The U.S. government tried to help farmers with money, but this cost the government a lot. Governments can get more money from tariffs in the short term. However, trade wars can also be expensive for them. They might need to help industries and workers who lose money. Trade wars can also damage relationships between countries. This makes it harder for them to work together in the future. In the end, trade wars usually do not have clear winners. Some businesses and workers might gain a little, but many others lose. Shoppers pay more, some businesses struggle, and some workers lose jobs. The costs are often higher than the benefits. Chapter 7. The Real Cost. Trade wars have costs. These costs are not just about money, they affect many parts of life. One cost is economic. When countries put tariffs on goods, trade becomes less efficient. Things become more expensive. For example, if country A puts a tariff on cars from country B, cars from country B cost more in country A. People in country A might pay more for cars. Businesses in country A that use parts from country B also pay more. This can slow down economic growth. People can lose jobs if companies cannot sell as much. Prices for everyday things like food and clothes can go up. Markets can become unstable, and the value of investments can fall. Trade wars also have political costs. When countries fight over trade, they can become less friendly. Trust between countries can disappear. It becomes harder for countries to work together on other problems. Sometimes trade wars can make political problems worse. Countries might become angry and want to retaliate, meaning they put tariffs on goods from the first country in return. This can lead to more and more tariffs, and the situation gets worse. International organizations that help countries trade fairly can become weaker. There are social costs, too. Some people lose more than others in trade wars. Workers in some jobs might lose their jobs. Families might find it harder to pay for things. This can create inequality and make people unhappy. People might move to find work, which can disrupt communities. Trade wars can also have wider effects. They can change how countries relate to each other in the world. Alliances between countries can become weaker. Other countries that are not involved in the trade war might gain an advantage. Some people even call trade wars economic warfare. This means using economic actions to harm another country, like in a real war but without weapons. In short, trade wars are not simple. They have many real costs that affect economies, politics, and people's lives. These costs are important to consider when thinking about trade. Chapter 8. A Better Way. Trade wars cause many problems. We have seen that when countries put tariffs on products from other countries, things get difficult. Prices for normal people can go up. Businesses can lose money. Sometimes countries stop being friends and start to argue. This is not good for anyone. Is there a better way to deal with trade problems? Maybe instead of trade wars, countries can talk to each other. They can make agreements together. This means sitting down and discussing the problems. It is not always easy, but it can be better than tariffs. One important thing is to work together with other countries. There are groups like the World Trade Organization, WTO. These groups try to help countries agree on rules for trade. When countries work together, it can be fairer for everyone. It is like playing a game with rules that everyone knows. Sometimes trade problems happen because of unfair things. For example, one country might help its companies too much with money. This is called subsidies. Or a country might copy ideas or products from another country without permission. This is intellectual property theft. These things can make trade unfair. Countries need to talk about these problems and find ways to solve them. The world is changing. Technology and globalization are making trade more complex. Products are often made in many different countries. This means countries need to work together even more. They need to understand each other and find ways to cooperate. Trade is important for everyone. It can help countries grow and become richer. But trade wars can stop this from happening. Maybe there is a better way than fighting. Talking, agreeing, and working together might be a better path for the future. It is not simple, but it is important to try to find a better way for everyone to trade fairly. Thanks for watching. If today's lesson was helpful, we would appreciate your support with a like, comment, and subscription. These simple actions make a huge difference in helping us create more quality English learning content. We value your participation in our community.